Oh my God, are you okay? Everything in the world feels like it's on fire, you know? So I thought, why not do a Bob Ross series tonight? You know, he made so many of us so happy. Before I do start it though, I want you to know that Bob Ross was a man, okay? Not a perfect man at all. And he was out here. I wouldn't want to be married to him, but I do love watching him on TV. So Robert Norman Ross was born on October 12th, 1942. He is a Scorpio sun and a Cancer moon. So many feelings though. Imagine getting into an argument with him. Shit, I'm a Cancer sun, Leo moon, getting into an argument with me. I mean, some of you have seen me fight on here. I'm not proud of what I said, but I meant it. So Bob Ross was born in Daytona Beach, Florida. Jack and Ollie Ross were his parents. His dad was a carpenter and his mom was a waitress. And you know who else was a carpenter? My Uncle Ray in New Canaan, Connecticut. And Jesus. So that's great company to be in, Jack Ross. So he was born in Daytona, but he grew up in Orlando with his half-brother Jim, I believe, and his mom and dad. So Bob wanted to be a carpenter like his dad, but after an incident where he basically cut off part of his index finger, I assume doing carpentry, he was like, this isn't for me. And he joined the Air Force. I had a hard time finding childhood photos of Bob Ross, but there are a lot of photos of him in uniform. And I know that people are really surprised when they hear that Bob Ross was a military man because of Bob's gentle nature on television. And I understand that. But there are so many interviews where people say Bob was a bleeding heart. Truly, he was always taking care of he would find an injured animal and nurse them back to health. And I'm not talking kittens. I'm talking he would find an injured armadillo, a snake. Even as a child, he would come home with these injured squirrels and his mom would be like, all right, bring him in here. And he would bring animals on his show all the time. Okay, so it's 1961. Bob enlists in the Air Force. He is 18 years old. He is a medical records technician. So he was stationed in a clinic in Eielson, Alaska, and this is really where he fell in love with snowy mountains and that kind of landscape that we saw a lot of on his show. So it was during his breaks at the Air Force, during the day, he would want to really quickly, he'd be so touched with the landscape. He's like, I gotta try to paint this. And that's where he started fast painting. You know what I mean? That was me fast painting. After holding high rankings in the Air Force, he was forced to be harsh, have a tougher demeanor than what he wanted. So it was after the Air Force where he swore he would never raise his voice again. In 1981, after serving 20 years in the Air Force, he retired from the military, and he was a master sergeant. But before he retired, he started taking these painting classes out of Anchorage, and he was a little frustrated with the syllabus out there. He was at this place called the USO Club, right, taking classes, and he would feel frustrated because they were more focused on kind of an abstract lesson plan, meaning he would say I want to paint a tree. I actually have a quote right in front of me. They tell you what makes a tree, but they wouldn't tell you how to paint a tree. He really just wanted to learn how to paint what was in front of him. And they would teach him about color theory and composition. And he'd be like, I want to know how to paint a mountain. But he really did start falling in love with this art form, right? He said that he became so in love with painting and wanting to get better that as soon as he got home, he would take off his military uniform and put on whatever clothes and just start painting right after work. So while he was in the Air Force, he'd come home, he'd start painting immediately, but he was also a part-time bartender at some bar in town, and he would sell little tin paintings to tourists and stuff. And it was during one of his shifts as a bartender that he saw an episode of this show called The Wonder of Oil Painting, The Magic of Oil Painting by this painter, William Alexander. And this painter, William Alexander, was using this technique called wet on wet. Don't make me do Italian right now. The world is on fire. Please don't make me speak Italian. The only Italian that I know is me piace dormitare e mangiare, and that's all I learned in high school. It's all I probably said this a million fucking times. Definitely during my Sophia Loren series, where it's all I know how to say is I like to eat and sleep. And I might tell you a joke, but I'd never tell you a lie. That is so real of me. So the thing about the wet on wet technique is that paintings done this way could be done very quickly, completed very quickly, because the different layers of oils can be applied pretty immediately versus having to wait for them to dry. Googling this, I was like, yes, alla prima, like, okay. Wet on wet technique. And Bob was like, this is what I've been wanting. This is what I've been needing. I just want to see, you know what I mean? I just want to see what I like, and I want to paint what I like, and, you know? And so then he turned to the magic of painting as like a real like education for him. And because of these episodes, he started being able to complete 2 paintings a lunch break at the Air Force. I also think he hated yelling at people or being like this like tough guy at work so much that painting helped him tap into like his sensitive side. I'm going to read you a quote with the Orlando Sentinel. In 1990, I was the guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. And he earned this nickname, Bust 'em Up Bobby. And he hated being this person because it didn't feel like his true self. All day long, yelling. And then he said that he would come home and finally be able to paint the quiet landscapes of a world that he wanted to be a part of. Not this like rough and tough, the bust him up Bobby. That wasn't the real Bobby. Guys, we know the real Bobby. I'd come home all day after playing soldier and I'd paint a picture. I could paint the kind of world I wanted. It was clean, it was sparkling, shiny, beautiful, no pollution, nobody upset. Everybody was happy in this world. It wasn't an election year. I added that. Guys, it's so scary. Okay, so after he left the Air Force, he actually moved back to Florida to study under Bill Alexander. William, can I call you Bill? And he eventually became part of the Alexander Magic Art Supplies Company. And he became a traveling art teacher and art supplies salesman. And we did that together. Thank you so much for being there for me. And this is how Bob meets Annette. Annette is an interesting character indeed. But before we talk about Annette, I would like to go back to 1965. Okay, I know we just went all the way to 1981 and we talked about painting, whatever, but I'd like to talk more about his romantic life. May I? It is a doozy. So Bob meets his first wife, Vivian Ridge, in 1965. She becomes pregnant with their first child just a few months after their wedding, but they divorce in 1977. Because of Bob's infidelity. No, I know. We can't have anything. Bob Ross was very busy. This man loved to paint and this man loved to cheat. So Bob actually has 2 kids, right? So the first kid is from his first marriage, right? Robert Stephen Ross. And he also fathered a child as a teenager, but not much is known about this child. So Bob and Viv break up. And in the same year, he marries someone else. I'm sure they met that year. Jane Zanardelli. So Jane was actually working in the Air Force where they met. And probably not that year. They probably met way before that. She was the base commander's secretary for the base that Bob was living on. Tale as old as time. According to Bob's son, Bob, they were very much in love and they were together until Jane died in 1992. Bob's son Bob was also a painter and would often appear on Bob's show too. Okay, no, let's go back to 1981 for a second. We'll return, don't you worry. So, actually I'll do that in part 2. Part 2, Bob Ross. Okay, so where were we? Okay, it's 1981. This story does get a little crazy. So it's 1981. He is a traveling art salesman. And then we again meet who I mentioned before, Annette Kowalski. Annette Kowalski takes one of his painting classes while he's working with the Alexander Magic Art Supplies Company. And she's like, whoa, you are really, really talented. You should start a business with me and my husband, Walt. Okay. He's like, I don't know. He goes to a local radio station, does an ad spot for his classes. The station manager is like, yo, your paintings are really, really good. We should do like a series together. And I think that was stupid because it's radio. But Bob tells Annette and Walt, and they're like, no, we got to pursue television because that's common sense, I feel. How would a paint and radio? Hey, but the guy had an eye for talent. The guy who said we should, whatever. Okay. If I was Bob, I'd be like, thank you. So Annette, the couple, Annette and Walt are like, we should pursue television. That'd be a great way to get people to your classes. So in 1982, a tape of one of Bob's art classes aired as a pilot on a station in Falls Church, Virginia, under the title, The Joy of Painting. In The Joy of Painting's first year, 60 PBS stations signed up for the show. The PBS station WIPB in Munis, Indiana, offered him full creative control, and Bob hung out with the staff there, became friends, and he decided, okay, Munis is it for me. Even though Bob did move back permanently to Florida in 1989, he would be in Munis, Indiana, every 3 months in order to film the show. And the early days were very makeshift, movie magic, if you will. He said that they were filming in a very old house, and that's why in the early episodes, there's like this black curtain because they were trying to hide the fireplace of this old house that they were in. This is actually a screen grab from the first episode of Bob Ross's show, The Joy of Painting. What they would do is they would paint 3 episodes in one day. And Bob did the show for free. He made money off other ventures, books, at-home videotapes, and he sold art supplies. But yeah, he did the show for free. I think it's like 31 seasons for free. The show ran from January 11th, 1983 to May 17th, 1994. Here's a quote from an article about The Joy of Painting. Bob Ross created 3 versions of each painting he did on the show. The first painting he'd do was on an easel off camera for Bob to look at as he painted the second painting for the show. After filming, he would paint a third, more detailed version of the painting for his instructional books. Episodes were half an hour, and Bob would complete the entire painting in one single episode. There was no editing done in the show, so everything was painted in real time. He would complete a painting in 26 to 28 minutes, and he purposefully used minimal colors on his easel so that the painting would, so that his style would remain affordable for people of all economic statuses. He wanted it to stay cheap. I was trying to impress you. Same with brushes. He would try to use like 3 brushes. And he obviously specialized in landscapes. Here is a quote. I look a lot at nature, and if painting teaches you nothing else, it'll teach you to look at nature with different eyes. And another signature style of his was his gentle voice and philandering. No, I'm just kidding. And I'm going to show you a clip. Ignore me in the reflection, please. Thank you. And here. I just want to watch it with you.
Hi, welcome back. I'm sitting here playing with a couple of the cutest little characters that God has ever made. These are a couple of little baby flying squirrels. Tiny little rascals. They're about 6 weeks old. Look at that. Aren't they some of the most precious little things you've ever seen? There, turn around here so we can see you. We call them Slim and Trim. There.
So cute. Okay, now some of his paintings. I have to be quick because TikTok will take this down because I don't know why. Because you hate me. I don't know. Let this Bob Ross clip live. Please, please, I beg you, Mr. TikTok. Okay.
Midnight black. Midnight black. And a little touch of Prussian blue in it, but mostly midnight black. cut off a little roll of paint. Let's go right up in here. And we have to make our first major decision. Maybe old Mountain lives right there.
Now a little bit of the finished product. Hold on.
There's a little bush. I like to paint bushes and trees. I think I told you the story in one of the earlier shows. In a different series that years ago I studied portraits. And after a long time, my portrait teacher took me aside one night and he said, Bob, I got to tell you the truth. He said, I want you to go paint bushes and trees because that's where your heart is. And leave portrait painting to someone else. And I have.
Oh, Bob. So this was not his like natural speaking voice. And I have a quote from an interview his son, Bob Steven, okay? The voice Bob used for the show was actually not his natural speaking voice, and in fact, a creative choice Bob made. I asked him, why do you talk this way on TV? And he said, well, you know, Bill Alexander was always kind of harsh. You know, his voice was harsh and he was very hyper and energetic. So my father decided, well, it seems to me that most of our audience is female, so maybe I'll try to whisper. That's really cute. His son also speculates that his dad was trying to be a little sexy. No, guys, what I say in part 1, he is a man. It's a man's world. You don't think I hear myself being painfully millennial? You think it's lost on me? No, I hear it. I hear it. But every time I say something embarrassingly millennial, an angel gets its wings. Do you fucking hate angels? Bob Ross Sr. also very much loved his hair. He was always very fixated on his hair. So he would get, that's a perm that he would get done. Okay, I have a quote. He referred to having his perm done as having his springs tightened. You know what? Maybe what I did just now isn't that embarrassing. Bob eventually grew to dislike his perm, but decided to keep it after it was incorporated on the company logo. He also very much cared about his fashion. He said that he would only wear a light colors, like a light top and a light bottom, because he believed that was a more timeless look. Also, I get it. Like, you're doing the show for free. There's no budget, essentially. Like, he didn't have a stylist, I'm sure. And I need to believe that that's his chain. I need to believe that that's his chain. You know what I mean? No, I've convinced myself that it's his chain. It has to be. I don't know what it is, but those jeans are tight. tight jeans. Okay, so this is a horrible photo, but bear with me. So him and his son had a very complicated relationship throughout Bob's life. There's a documentary called Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed. That is the title of the documentary. And Steve speaks on their dynamic within this documentary. And I quote, "There was a power struggle between us, I guess you would say. There was a little bit of a fight that broke out between us. I wanted to go off and do my own thing, and he wanted me to do what he did. It was probably a few years that we didn't talk that much. He wanted me to be more successful than him. Heck, one time even told me that on the painting show he didn't paint as well as he could because he wanted to make it easier for me in the future for when I took over." The director of the show was this woman named Sally Schneck. I know that I'm mispronouncing that. I know that I am. And I'm so sorry, Miss Sally. Okay. And she goes on to say that Bob was a huge, Bob was a big flirt. He was charismatic, but he flirted with me. He flirted with any female staff member. That's just the way he was. He was charming, but I think he also did it to make him feel good. Oh, it's just, I don't paint as well as I should because I want you to look good. It's not because I want to flirt. It's because I want people to feel good. You know what I'm saying? Okay, Bobby. All right, Bobby. The martyr, huh? Okay. Speaking of flirtations, I need to talk about Annette. So this Annette woman I mentioned took a class in I think it was Clearwater, Florida. Here's a quote. "She became so entranced with Bob's kind energy and calm demeanor, as well as his painting skills and his tight jeans." No, I made that up. And his painting skills, that she convinced Bob that he would be successful starting his own painting company. Bob and his then wife, Jane, poor Jane, along with Annette and her husband, Walt, put all their savings together to create Bob's company. Part 3, Bob Ross. Where were we? So Bob and his wife Jane, along with Annette and her husband Walt, put all their savings together to create Bob's company. Okay. Walter had just retired from the CIA when they founded the company. I called Bob and I said, I don't know what you've got, but I think we ought to bottle it and sell it. At one point in time, Bob and Jane even moved in. You know where this is going. Even moved in with Annette and Walt and lived with them for around 2 years. The Kowalskis began to exhibit strange and secretive behavior that was alarming to friends and family of Bob and Jane. The Kowalskis always record their business phone calls with a suction cup on the back of a telephone, which I always thought was pretty weird. That's from Steve Ross. That it was pretty fucking weird. Yeah, Bob, Steve, and Ross. So they call him Steve, not Bob. That makes sense. Okay. Annette and Bob began to fuck. They began to have an affair. The other day, can I just say something really quickly? Okay. The other day, I'm walking down the street and these 2 girls stop me and they're like, hi, I'm 16 and she's 11. It's my sister. We are huge fans of yours. I was like, girls, you should not be watching my shit. You should not be. Like, stop it. I'm grateful, but stop it. If you are a teenager and you're watching my stuff, please do not start to talk like me. I have a filthy, disgusting mouth. So much so that sometimes when people stitch my videos, in that new creator's video, they say, I apologize for her language. I hope it doesn't offend anyone. That's how filthy my mouth is. You do not want to talk like me, motherfuckers. Okay, where were they? Annette and Bob are fucking, okay? Gary and Catherine Jenkins, friends of Bob's who also hosted a painting instruction television video, remember becoming suspicious of Bob and Annette's relationship. Sorry, that was also very annoying of me. Millennial. When we were at the early trade shows in the 80s, we'd go pick them up for dinner and they'd come out of the same little hotel room and all, "Scene dinner." That was loud for me. No shame. Oh my God. Okay. We knew there were funny things going on. That's Catherine's quote. Catherine. Kathwren. Everybody's so creative. Okay. Eventually Jane found out about the fair because she's not a fucking idiot. I remember it was Christmas night. Please. I remember it was Christmas night. I heard some arguing from the bedroom. Jane was asking him, are you having relations with that woman? I am not having relations with that woman. Name that guy. Come on, Arkansas. Okay, so are you having relations with that woman? The truth came out. That's the Sun's quote. As time passed and the business grew, Annette became more and more infatuated with Bob because we all love a man that doesn't want us. Annette! Oh, stand up. And he's cheating on Jane. Annette, you don't think he's going to do you the exact same? Oh, whatever. Okay. Where is that clip, actually?
Taylor's oldest time.
So Annette starts to get, like, extremely jealous over Bob, okay? Bob would pay attention to someone else, and Annette did not like that. That might have been a little, I'd say, a jealousy streak. This is from Dana Jester, okay? Who the fuck is Dana Jester? Well, she's the one with the quote. I have no fucking idea. Bob and his wife Jane made up, but the affair caused tensions between them. You fucking think? Sorry, Bob. Tension between them and the Kowalskis. Fucking duh. Fucking duh. What's the one rule? You don't shit where you eat and you don't fuck where you work. So, like, that is my number one consejo. That is my number one tip. Please don't fuck your coworkers. Please don't fuck the people who are helping you fund your shit. Okay. For Bob, watch me like a year later be fucking. No, I won't. I know better. For Bob, the part of the company he cared about were the workshops in which he could encourage people to discover art and their talent. For the Kowalskis, their focus was on the sale of Bob Ross branded supplies. Bob was very picky about the quality of art supplies, as the correct kind of paint must be used for his wet on wet technique. Yeah, I'm sure Annette loved that wet on wet technique. Nasty. I'm also mad at Bob. So the paint's going to be very specific for this technique that he's teaching proactively to work, right? However, Walt, the cuck, no, teenage girls, please don't watch this. Please don't Google what that is. Please. But Walt was always like trying to cut corners. The money man. Classic. I'm so sorry I called you a cuck, bro. I'm so sorry. And he wanted him to sell lesser quality paint, so fights would erupt regarding the quality products continued and caused further rift between the Rosses and the Kowalskis. So not only was Bob demanding quality, but he was fucking Walt's wife. Bob is later diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Let me give it a Google. Hold on. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer. Now, I know you're like, oh, why doesn't she know that? I think I'm very blessed not to know how to say that. Very scary to think about. So when he came out as, why'd I say it like that? When he was diagnosed with cancer, the Kowalskis were like fucking panicked about what the hell they're gonna do. Nice people. Their entire business revolved around this man who was now sick. So Annette decides, you know what? I'm going to start my own television show about painting. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become this sick man's competitor. 1 minute, they're putting a suction cup on the back of the phone, and the next, they're taking your whole fucking shtick. Well, she was painting flowers, and she named it Bob Ross Presents The Joy of Painting Flowers. Now, there was another television couple that specialized in painting flowers. That was their whole thing. They were the Jenkins. The Jenkins would paint flowers on TV, and they were very good friends with Bob Ross. So when they saw this happening, they were like, hey, Bob, what the fuck? In fact, they were so close that Bob, throughout his 31 seasons, would recommend his audience to go watch the Jenkins's show and attend their workshops. That's how close they were. This is a quote from Gary Jenkins. She just wanted to control the whole market. She did it so that there would be no competition from us. She wanted us gone. According to Bob's son, Bob, I can't stop, Steve Ross, Bob had told him that the company was initially set up with a voting system in place between the Kowalskis and Jane and Bob. When Jane died, the Kowalskis took it as an opportunity to do whatever they wanted with the company, as now they could always outvote Bob. Because 3 is an odd number. I get it now. Okay, I'm right there with you guys. I'm filming this at 11:35 at night. Give me a break. Okay. It was more or less like, this is also from Steve Ross, Steve Ross. It was more or less like, we're going to do what we want to do, and you're going to do what we tell you to do. While Bob was becoming weaker and weaker from his illness, Annette tried to get Bob's son, Steve, to give Bob a contract to sign. You know what it is? The Kowalskis are succubuses. What is the plural of an energy-stealing demon? Because that's what they are. So they give Steve this contract, claiming it's for a memorial that they want to build for Boss. However, it appears to actually have been a contract to sign over ownership of the Bob Ross name and likeness. Steve, not being a fucking idiot, read it and refused. I bit my tongue. And refused. Maybe that's the Lord telling me to stop cursing. Okay, fine. So, however, the closer to death Bob got, the more the Kowalskis started like pushing this contract on Steve. And he was like, fuck you, I already messed it up. And he was like, no, leave me alone. They were so pushy that Bob Ross, in his weakest state, Steve says that Bob was heard screaming from the other room, I'm not giving you my name. You're never getting my name. The Kowalskis did not attend Bob's funeral and told people to keep Bob's death a secret. Wait for this. Okay, part 4, Bob Ross. So listen to this. The Kowalskis did not attend Bob's funeral, as I told you, and even tried to keep the funeral a secret. Those who knew of Bob's death were instructed not to tell anyone, and in total, only 30 to 40 people came to his funeral. This is a beloved public persona. Like, this is a beloved person on television. This is a person's, like, when you have, like, comfort creators, this is, like, an OG comfort creator besides, like, Mr. fucking Rogers. I should do that series, too. I hear you, sister. I hear you. Okay, so only 40 people came to his funeral. It's fucking crazy. And Steve speaks on this further, saying they wanted people, I think, to believe he was still alive, and many people did. Even to this day, I've had to tell people that he's gone. That is kind of true. Sometimes, like, I've told a few people, like, oh, I'm doing a Bob Ross series. And they're like, is he still alive? I'm like, is Bob Ross still alive? No. I mean, I wish he was. I forgive him. You do too. I admit it. You do too. If I knew more about Annette, maybe I would see her side. But Jesus, because you know what I always say, women's rights and women's wrongs. But to not only cause such a rift in this man's marriage, but also try to, like, rob him of his legacy, and during his dying days try to force him to sign a contract where you basically own him forever is fucking crazy. But I'll touch on his cancer diagnosis a little bit more. So Jane passes away in 1992. 2 to 3 weeks later, he finds out that he has lymphoma. Okay. And a lot of people suspect that there are some contributing factors to this diagnosis. One, he was a smoker. And two, people think that it was his proximity to paint thinner all the time. Bob was constantly inhaling fumes from the paint thinner he used, often for his wet on wet technique. A signature part of his television program was Bob smacking, and I showed you guys, smacking his paintbrushes on his easel as he cleaned them. However, because he frequently dipped the brushes in paint thinner, he was essentially dousing himself in paint thinner near daily. 2 months before he passes, in 1995, he marries his third wife. He just had to, even in his dying days, he was still romancing and dancing around these ladies. Her name was Linda Brown, okay? According to Bob's friend, John Tham, or Tam, who knows? I've been calling it the River Thames forever. How fucking embarrassing. Okay, whatever. The other day I was talking to somebody from Korea and I called it Seoul. What do you want from me? It is Seoul. No, I called it Seoul. That's what I did. Whatever. I am an embarrassment and I curse a lot and I'm a bad image for little girls. Listen, the marriage was born out of circumstance rather than love. Bob had decided that the way he was going to circumvent problems with the Kowalskis was by marrying a nurse that he had known for a few months while he was in the hospital. He was trying to make some preparations for his half-brother and son, Bob, Steve, to continue on. He passes on July 4th, 1995. And to this day, people visit his gravesite and leave the paintings that they've recreated from his show and little paintbrushes for him. Back to the Kowalskis. Okay, so Bob passes, right? And the Kowalskis are at the helm of the company and they completely take it over. They change everything that he stood for. So I'm going to read you, get this out. Okay, get this out. Check this out. The Kowalskis started by cracking down hard on their painting workshops, okay? The students and instructors were now given guidelines to sign in on their first day, but it wasn't just a sign-on, it was actually a contract, limiting them from many things, like promoting other artists or buying any other paint supplies besides the Bob Ross products. The company went as far to encourage other students and teachers on snitching if they saw anybody breach these guidelines. And that's not all. They are lawyer happy, okay? They sued Bob Ross's third wife and Bob Ross's brother for all of Bob's belongings. I will list them off to you. They specifically wanted paintings Bob had made, brushes he's ever used, palettes he had on TV, and even paintings in Bob's personal home, like his paintings, you know? The Kowalskis garnered a reputation for suing anyone and everyone who questioned their authority. So even in this documentary, Bob's friends sit down. They're like, there are so many people who agreed to do interviews, but they're backing out because the Kowalskis are like looming over everybody with lawsuits constantly. Over a dozen friends and coworkers declined to be part of this documentary last minute. Also, get ready for this. After Bob's death, the Kowalskis and Bob Ross Inc. were now the biggest clients of their paint supplier. They then demanded their paint supplier blacklist the Jenkins from the industry. The paint supplier obliged, and the Jenkins career were essentially destroyed. Here are this is a picture of Annette. Here she is on her show, The Joy of Painting Flowers. There's Bob and Annette. There is Bob, Walt, and Annette. Okay, so then what happens? So Bob's son then partners with Dana Jester, who I mentioned earlier that I said, I don't know who that is. It's one of Bob's closest friends. I'm sure they did too, girl. So they create their own art supply line. They're also joined by like another art supply executive. But basically, Steve Ross is like, I want to use my last name. So what does he do? He decides to sue the Kowalskis. This is lawyer talk, so I have to read this to you. While trying to discover if he really did own the rights to his father's name, Steve found the First Amendment to the Bob Ross non-revocable trust, which stated that Bob had left control of almost all the IP rights to his son Steve and his brother Jim. He had left Jim 51% of the trust and Steve 49%. Steve soon found out that Jimmy, owning the technical majority of the trust, had signed over all rights of ownership to Bob Ross Inc. without telling Steve. Continued. When Bob Ross Inc. had sued both the estate and the trust, Jimmy signed over the rights to make the lawsuit go away. Bob had started recording all his phone calls with the Kowalskis with an actual fucking recorder. And these tapes of these phone calls were a massive part of the lawsuits against Bob Ross Inc., put up against Bob's third wife and brother. Releasing the tapes to Bob Ross Company was part of the settlement his brother ended up signing. Steve suspects most of these tapes have now been destroyed. What that all means, I don't know. I get the gist of it. But in June 2019, Steve lost his case against Bob Ross Inc. Today, we see Bob Ross merchandise in all forms: clothing, puzzles, calendars, coffee cups, and even a chia pet. And I did have that chia pet. Do you know that chia pets are chia seeds, like what you put in your yogurt, and if you water them? I have an Ice Spice one as well. Moving on. However, all this is owned by the Kowalskis and came to fruition long after Bob's death, meaning Bob was never able to give his consent to any of this merchandising. How sad is that? I always see that Bob Ross chia pet at Urban Outfitters. Always. Bob Ross Inc. rakes in millions of dollars a year, and Bob Steve Ross has never seen a cent. It makes me so sad because I remember, like, even as a kid when I would feel like sick and I'd stay home from school, when, you know, Maury wasn't on, I was watching Bob Ross, you know, and he is, what I said before is so true. He really is such a comfort for so many. Like, sometimes when I have people over, I'll put on a playlist. You can find them for free on YouTube, full episodes, and they're so wonderful. And I guess the message here today is, you know, don't cheat. No, imagine I ended it there. It's just a sad story about how, I mean, he did those episodes for free. I don't think he ever thought his life would turn into such a war. And this is a message for the Kowalskis. For me, my 16-year-old fan and my 11-year-old fan, love you bitches. No, just kidding. Do your parents know that you have a TikTok?